بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. Welcome again to this would be, I guess, the fifth session of Al-Ajirromyya, one of the most blessed books in the Arabic language. So before we start, I would like to ask if you have any questions from the previous class, from the previous lesson. If no questions,
I have a question, but
Brother Khadruddin, so I believe you're is this brother? Who is this?
It's Nasiruddin.
Brother Khadruddin. Okay, so what is your question?
How come we have been switching the meeting app? It was a separate question completely. I was gonna ask, but
if this question is related to the class and the meeting, inshallah, we'll talk about that later. But regarding our content, the lessons that we taught and we're learning, if you have any questions regarding that, inshallah, feel free to ask. But if this question is regarding the meeting and the tools that we're using, inshallah, we'll leave it till the end. Okay. So jazakumullah khairan. Let's begin. Okay, so last week, if you guys remember, we spoke about the inflections, right? We mentioned that there are 4 different types of inflections, and those 4 types are rafa, nasab, khafad, and jazm. And we said that these inflections are they are indicators of the meaning or the role of the word in the sentence, right? They are indicators of the meaning and the role of a sentence. There are signs for certain meanings, there are signs for certain roles that are in the sentence. And we also said that because we said in Arabic we have 3 parts of speech, so we can divide these inflections between nouns and verbs and see which one of these inflections are accepted by nouns and which ones are accepted by verbs. And something about particles, which is the 3rd part of the speech in Arabic. Particles do not accept inflection. They're mabni, which in Arabic mabni means something that does not accept inflections. So that is why in this division that we have in the slide, you don't see a particle, because a particle does not accept inflections, period, right? But words do. The majority of words do. The default position of words is to accept inflection. And the default position of verbs is also, I'm sorry, the default position of verbs is not to accept inflections, but there are certain verbs. There's one type of verb that does accept inflection, and that is why we have verbs here on this slide as well. And that verb that it does accept inflection is the present future tense verb, or as we call it, as it is called in the English translation, the imperfect verb. Okay. But the imperative verb and the past tense verb, these 2 they do not accept inflection. So here and now, have inshallah everyone understand that aspect, that part. Now here, as I said, what we're doing is we're in this slide, the author, the muallif rahimahullah, is telling us which inflections are accepted by nouns and which inflections are accepted by verbs. There are 2 inflections that are between verbs and nouns, and those 2 inflections are rafa and nasab. Rafa and nasab. So these 2 are, as you can see, they are both here. They're both here for nouns, rafa, nasab, and also verbs, rafa, nasab. But there's one inflection that nouns accept, but Verbs do not, and that inflection is khafd. And that is why when we were talking about the signs of nouns, we said khafd is one of the signs of nouns, right? Meaning a verb will not accept it, will not have the sign. And there's one inflection that a verb will have, but a noun will not have, and that is al-jazm. Al-jazm is the inflection that a verb will have, but a noun will not have. So that is why we have the translation says nouns except rafa, nasab, and khafd from the inflections, but not jazm, meaning they do not accept jazm. You will not see the inflection of jazm on nouns. And also verbs except rafa, nasab, and jazm from the inflections, but not khafd. You will not see the inflection of khafd on verbs, for verbs. So inshallah that is clear. Now so there are a few layers, and we need to understand these layers. Let me share my screen. First, I was not sharing my screen. Were you guys following these slides?
Yes,
Okay.
I had my PDF open, so I was following that.
Okay, I apologize. Yeah, so this is not good. Let me start sharing my screen. I thought I was sharing my screen, so. Sorry for the confusion. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yes, Sheikh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barakallah fikum. Please, whenever I speak as if I'm sharing my screen, stop me and let me know that I'm not sharing. It will be much more useful to everyone. So here, okay. So we said there are a few layers that we need to understand, right? And think of inflections as signs and indicators of the meanings behind a word, right? Signs and indicators of the meanings and the roles behind a word, right? And think now what we are going to do in the next slide, we will talk about the signs of inflections. So the inflections become indicators of meanings and roles, and then we also need, there's another layer where we need to know the signs of those inflections themselves. And this at first it's hard to wrap your head around this, but how can I yeah, I need to come up with a good example for this, like a real life example. But think of inflections as indicators of roles and meanings that words will have. And now what we will study right now, think of this as signs of the inflections themselves. So how do you know when a word has the inflection of rafa, right? What is the sign of you knowing whether a word has the inflection of rafa? What's the sign that indicates a word has the inflection of nasab? What is the sign that indicates a word has the inflection of khafd? What is the sign that indicates that a word has the inflection of jazm, right? So now what we will do is study those signs, right? We will study these signs that tell us when a word is marfu or has the inflection of rafa, nasab, khafd, and jazm. So the author rahimahullah starts, it says, فأما الضمة فتكون علامة الرفع في أربعة مواضع. In the case of a dhamma, it becomes a sign of rafa in 4 places. Okay, I think I skipped a slide. Yes, I apologize. So we were on slide 25. The author says, للرفع أربع علامات. Rafa inflection, the inflection of rafa has 4 different signs. The inflection of rafa has 4 different signs. الضمة والواو والألف والنون. الضمة is one sign of rafa. Al-waw is another sign of rafa. Al-alif is another sign of rafa. Al-noon is another sign of rafa. Okay, so remember, just I gave you a very simple example last week. We said, for example, the subject of a sentence is always what? Is always marfu. Remember, we said whether it's a verbal or the nominal subject, it will always be marfu. So basically, this inflection of rafa, which is given to the subject, it indicates the role of the word. So if you see in certain contexts, if you see a word has the inflection of rafa, that indicates that is a sign for what? For the fact that that noun is the subject. So it indicates something about the meaning of the sentence, right? Now, a dhamma is one of the signs that indicates, that tells you that that word or that noun has the inflection of rafa. For example, when we say Ja'a Zaydun, Zayd came. Ja'a Zaydun means Zayd came. Zayd is the subject, right? Now, how do we know, just by looking at Zayd, how do we know that it is marfu'? We know it is marfu' because it has a dhamma here, right? Now, so now that we know it is marfu', what is the role of Zayd? What do we infer or arrive at from by knowing that dhamma is a sign of rafa, and knowing that Zayd has the inflection of rafa? We realize, we learn that Zayd is the subject, right? Did you see the different layers? First, from dhamma, we realize that Zayd has the inflection of rafa, and then when realizing that Zayd has the inflection of rafa, we realize that Zayd is the subject. So there are two layers that we had to go through. Obviously, when we think about it, when we speak and when we write and when we read, we don't think about these different layers, but it is subconsciously we are going through these different layers and processes to understand language. Does that make sense? Okay, so now the second. Alhamdulillah. Now the second sign is al-waw. Waw also becomes a sign of rafa. Okay. And where does waw become a sign of rafa? And that is something we will study, inshallah, either in this, perhaps next week. Today we won't get to it. But know that just like dhamma, how dhamma for certain words it becomes a sign of rafa. Waw, the letter in Arabic, al-waw, also becomes a sign of rafa in certain words, and we will talk about those words. Similarly, al-alif becomes a sign of rafa in certain words, right? And also an-noon becomes a sign of rafa, indicates rafa in certain words. Okay. Now these words, we will discuss them in detail. Starting with ad-dhamma. So now we will study the words or the nouns for which dhamma becomes a sign of rafa. And that is the slide that I mistakenly read at the beginning. So فأما الضمة فتكون علامة للرفع في 4 مواضع. In the case of الضمة, it becomes a sign of الرفع, or it becomes a sign of rafa in 4 places. It should be there's a lag. Okay, it becomes a sign of الرفع in 4 places. في الاسم المفرد وجمع التكسير وجمع المؤنث السالم وفعل المضارع الذي لم يتصل بآخره شيء. So the first place where dhamma becomes a sign of rafa is in the singular noun. Right? Is in the singular noun. So there's I guess it's a good start to talk about what it mean, the different types of nouns when it comes to quantity in the Arabic language. So in English, we have the singular and the plural, right? The singular is, for example, book, and the plural of book is the way you make it plural is you add an S, it becomes books, right? So that is the general rule, that is the qaida. In English, you add an S to the end of a word and it becomes plural. But in Arabic, we have three actually. We have the singular, we have the plural, but there's something in the middle, which is the dual. The dual indicates duality, meaning when you wanna say there are two of that noun, that thing that you're naming, there are only two of them, you use this dual form. In English, we don't have that dual form, right? So for example, in English, you have Muslim, and then you will have Muslims, right? There's nothing in between, right? In Arabic, it becomes very interesting. So you have al-Muslim. Okay, al-Muslim means the Muslim man. Okay, so this is the singular, and then you have al-Muslimani. This is the dual, and then you have al-Muslimuna. This is the plural, right? So this is one Muslim man, two Muslim men, and three Muslim men, or three or more, a group of Muslim men. It doesn't necessarily have to be three. Okay, and how did we change? What happened between these? So with the we're talking about the inflection of rafa right now. Just think that, keep that in mind, because with nasab and khafad, these it will change. The dual and the plural will change. But this is the inflection of rafa. We're talking about. Let me put up rafa here. Okay, we were talking about al-rafa. So let's not. I don't want us to confuse this with nasab when we start talking about it. Okay, so to make a singular noun dual in Arabic, when it's marfu', you simply add alif and noon to it. You simply add alif and noon. I apologize for the slowness. For some reason, after I started recording, this lag was introduced. Okay, so this alif and noon, these two letters indicate duality when it has the inflection of rafa. And if you want to make it plural, you add a waw and a noon. You add a waw and a noon. Okay, so this is the general rule in Arabic, right? This is the qaida. This is how you make something dual, and this is how you make some. Also, here the third one is how you make something plural. And just like in English, the rule to make something plural is to add an S. So this is the general rule. And remember, we at the beginning of the class, the first session, we mentioned that basically when we defined the science of Arabic grammar, we said it is the knowledge of general rules, right? A group of general rules with which we are basically able to use and speak. Obviously, the definition was more detailed and more precise than that, but just a summary of it. So this is how you do it, and then there are always exceptions, right? For example, in English, what is the plural of what is the plural of fish? Fish, right? You don't say fishes, right? So this actually goes against the rule. I guess in Arabic you would call this a broken plural because it has gone against the rules, right? So here there are certain words in Arabic that do not conform to the general rule. For example, if I wanted to make al-rajul plural, I would not say I would not say ar-rajulun. This would make absolutely no sense. You see how I added waw and a noon to it? So this is totally wrong. Even though this is qaida, but Arabs do not make ar-rajul plural like this. So they would reject this. They would not understand what you're saying. The way you make ar-rajul plural is by doing this. Is by adding an alif between the jim and the lam. Now in Arabic we call this the broken plural. Why? Because it breaks the rules and it breaks the form of the noun. You see in here the noun, the singular form of the noun is preserved in all three cases. Do you see? Al-Muslim, Al-Muslimani, Al-Muslimani. If you would pay attention, Al-Muslim is here, still here, but we just added alif and noon. And here also in the plural, Al-Muslim is still here. The form of the noun, the singular noun has not changed. We've just added waw and a noon, right? So the form we have not broken Al-Muslim to make it plural. We kept the Muslim the way it was, and then we just added alif and noon to it. But in the case of al-rajul, we broke the form of the noun. We broke the jim and the lam and added an alif between it, right? So this is one of the reasons why we call it the broken plural, right? Now there are different ways. You can either the broken plural is either by removing something or by adding something or by changing the haraka. So there are many different ways that you can make something a broken plural, but those will be inshallah for more advanced classes. We don't have to worry about it in this class. Okay, so this is very important. I want you guys to really understand the difference between the singular, the dual, and the plural, and also I want you guys to understand the difference between the broken plural and the sound plural. So this would be the first al-Muslim, al-Muslimani, al-Muslimuna. These would be sound plural. So al-Muslimuna would be the sound plural, but al-Rijal would be the broken plural. And something else I need to add here is that this is all for masculine plural. This is for the masculine plural. This is what? This is for the masculine plural. If we were to say, make it feminine, first of all, al-Muslim would be al-muslima. Okay. Al-Muslim would become al-Muslima. The way you make it feminine is by adding this ta here. Okay. The dual would remain the same, meaning we would still okay, we would still keep al-Muslim the form, but we would just keep the ta as well. So you would say al-Muslimatan. You see how here there is no ta here for the masculine. So therefore, when you say al-Muslimani, we don't have to keep that say al-Muslimatani. We don't, because there is no ta. But here, because when you say one Muslim woman, you have to add this ta to it. Also, when you make it dual, you have to keep that ta. You cannot remove that ta. So you say al-Muslimatani. That's the dual. And then the plural for feminine plural is totally different. What you have to do is you have to add alif and ta to it. So this is how you make the feminine plural. Is this clear? So this is something you have to memorize. I will expect everyone to memorize the difference between the singular noun, the plural noun, the dual noun, and the plural noun, and also how it is different for men and woman, and also the difference between the broken plural, the sound plural, and the broken plural. So this is something I will expect you to know. Yes, brother.
Sheikh.
Marajul.
Yes, Sheikh. The dual form of the feminine Muslim. Did you spell that
Yeah.
incorrectly?
Al-Muslim. Yes, I did. Good catch. Al-Muslimatani. Yes. And that's what you meant? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. So any other questions before we move on?
Yes. How would you pronounce the plural of women? As al-Muslimatan?
The plural you would say al-Muslimat. Yeah.
Okay.
Al-Muslimat. Yeah.
Okay. Because in the first one it's a ha, but this one it's a ta. So it's just
yeah. So exactly, very good. So here, if we were to the reason we pronounce it as a ha is because we stop. But if there was something after it, we would have to pronounce the ta. For example, if I was to give it the attribute of alima, meaning scholar, alright, I'll mute myself. There's always this car, and our neighbor has this car and this motorcycle. Whenever they turn it on, it's like there's an earthquake. So, but yeah, they left. That's fine. So, al-muslimatul alimatu. This means the Muslim woman, who is the scholar Muslim woman. Here, so the reason I mentioned this, or you can say also Muslimatun alimatun. The reason I mentioned this is because we're not stopping, you have to mention the ta. And that is something else. We'll study the reasons why that is, and But that is perhaps not necessarily related to this class. And this it has to do with more with pronunciation and recitation. But just realize if there is a ta like this at the end of a word, if you stop after pronouncing that word, you don't pronounce the ta. You say muslima. The same thing. But if you don't stop, for example, here we're saying muslimatun alimatun, muslimatun. Do you guys hear how I'm pronouncing the ta? The reason for that, as I said, is because we're not stopping after muslima. There's something after it that you have to pronounce. So that is yes, brother Muhammad.
You have shown us that al-Muslim, al-Musliman, al-Musliman, and al-Muslimun. There is also al-Muslimin, isn't it, Ustaz? And also al-Mu'mineen.
Yeah, so basically here, the reason I started by saying, please make sure, you please remember always that this is for al-Rafa. This is not for al-Nasab. So what you're mentioning is for different inflections. Okay, alhamdulillah. So here, this is a good, please make sure you understand and you memorize this. And I will also add more explanation to this slide after, inshallah, after the class. I don't want to spend time adding explanation right now. But I will make it self-sufficient, meaning you don't really have to watch the video to understand this slide. But not, inshallah,
I have a question.
not now. Yes, brother Khalaluddin. Or brother Nuruddin? Nasruddin. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Is this universal?
So basically, exactly. So as I said, when we say the sound plural, that is universal. When we say the sound plural, that is universal. When we say the broken plural has its own basically it doesn't follow the rules. So basically those are exceptions.
So it could apply to different words that can be.
Yes, very good. That's a beautiful question. So when we say a qaida, when we say a general rule or something that is universal, that means you can take another word and apply the same logic or apply the same rules to it and make it dual or plural. For example, al-Muslim. This is the example that we gave. But I said this is a general rule or a universal rule. Adding an alif and nun to it will make it dual, and adding a waw and nun to it will make it plural. So because I said it's universal or general, you know that if you were to come up with a different name, for example, if you were to say alim, you would be able to do the same, make it dual, and make it plural the same way that you make Muslim plural. So you would have you could add alif and nun to alim. You say alimani, and you would have that would be dual, and you would add waw and a nun to alim. You would say al-alimuna, and that would be the plural, right? So once you know this qaida, once you know this rule, you can apply it anywhere you want. Good question.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask because I don't know the words in Arabic, so it's kind of hard for me to identify how it would apply, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And with the vocab and the words in Arabic, that it comes with time, basically. With this class and the book that we are reading, all I expect you to know is the meanings of the terminology that we use, and also the meanings of the examples that we use, right? And that will give you some basically will add some vocab to your Arabic vocabulary list. But over time, the more big books you read, the more you are exposed to people speaking Arabic, the more vocab you will have in your basically in your brain's database. So so that comes with time. Don't worry about that now. But make sure that whatever we discuss in the class, you understand it. Okay, you understand the meanings of all the words that we discuss in the class. So I think that's that applies to everyone, because vocab is a very big part of any language. So, but if you can, it would be very good if you can commit yourself outside of class to actually learn Arabic vocabulary. But I will not make that part of the class because that would be outside of the scope of the book. Okay, so now that we understand the dual and the plural and the singular, so now let's go back to our slide. فأما الضمة فتكون علامة للرفع في أربعة مواضع. In the case of a dhamma, it becomes a sign of al-rafa in 4 places. The singular noun, right? The singular noun. Now everyone should know what the singular noun means in Arabic. Example, جاء زيد. Zayd came. The example is جاء زيد. Zayd came. So this is the first place where a dhamma becomes what? Becomes a sign of rafa. I want you to go back to the layers that we talk about, how a dhamma tells us it has a sign, it has the inflection of rafa, and how a rafa tells us that that word is the subject, right? So always keep that in mind. So Zayd came, right? That's the first example. That's the first place where dhamma becomes a sign of rafa, the singular noun. And then the second place where dhamma becomes a sign of rafa is the wajam' al-taksir, in the broken plural. In the broken plural. Can someone tell me what a broken plural is?
Sheikh, whenever we change the original appearance of the word and we put in between a letter.
Yes.
Alif.
So exactly. So that's, yeah, very good. So that's the process. That's the process how you make something a broken plural. And also another way you could answer this is a broken plural is a plural that does not follow the general rule of making something plural, right? So it's an exception. So also dhamma becomes a sign of rafa in the broken plural. Like the example that I give is ja'a rijalu, which means the men came. Ja'a rijalu. You see how there's a dhamma at the end of rijal? So again, the dhamma indicates that al-rijal has the inflection of rafa. And then once you know that al-rijal has the inflection of al-rafa, what do you know about al-rijal? You know that al-rijal, that these men are the subjects of the sentence, right? The third place where dhamma becomes a sign of rafa is وَجَمْعِ الْمُؤَنَّثِ السَّالِمِ, in the sound feminine plural, right? So meaning the feminine plural that follows the rule. And we said the way you make a feminine noun plural is you add an alif and a ta to it. You guys remember from the slide that we just added? So once you see this form of the noun, you know that it is a feminine plural. It is a sound feminine plural. And so here in this case as well, dhamma becomes a sign of al-rafa. Ja'atil muslimatu. Ja'atil muslimatu. You guys hear the dhamma here? You guys see the dhamma here?
Yeah.
So this dhamma tells you that al-muslimat is what? Has the inflection of rafa, nasab, or khafd? What does the Dhamma tell you?
It says it's Rafa. Yeah, it's Rafa, bro.
Very good. Because so now we know that al-Muslimat has the inflection of Rafa. What does that tell us? We said one of the main roles that a Rafa indicates or is a sign for is being a subject. So we know that al-Muslimat has the inflection of Rafa, and based on the context, we infer that what? We infer that we arrive at the fact that al-Muslimat, this is the subject of the sentence. The woman came. The woman came. Now the the fourth place is the imperfect verb, which has nothing attached to its end. What do we mean by the fourth place? Meaning the fourth place where Dhamma becomes a sign of Rafa. And basically the imperfect verb is like the present future tense verb, right? For example, the example that I have here, يكتب زيد المسألة. Zaid is writing the subject or the matter. Now here, do you guys see how there's a Dhamma on top of yaktubu? Do you guys follow?
Yes, Sheikh. Yes.
Okay. So this Dhamma indicates that yaktubu has the inflection of Rafa. And yaktubu is a verb. Yaktubu is a verb. And what this tells us is a few things. One of them is that it is not specific to the past tense nor the future tense. And I will explain that because for example, if you add one of the agents of jazm here, lam, that would make yaktubu past tense instead of present or future. If you add the agent of nasab here, lan, that will make it to mean future only, not necessarily not past tense, and also not necessarily present tense. So basically, there is more to explain about what a dhamma would mean for a verb, but inshallah that will be in the next classes or even in the next books that we studied. At this point, what I want you to know is a dhamma on a verb indicates that verb has the inflection of rafa. Okay. Now this takes us to a whole different subject, and that is the subject of verb conjugations. Verb conjugations. And even though the scholar or the author, rahimahullah, will talk about the verb conjugations at the end, not at the end, towards the middle of the book, I think because we will talk about the verb conjugations before then, I will briefly go over the verb conjugations with you right now in the next 10 minutes that we have. So let's because we will mostly talk about the imperfect verb until we reach the point of the book in which he actually himself, rahimahullah, talks about verbs. I will go ahead and talk about the verb conjugations for only the imperfect verb. And that is something I will expect you to know for the next classes that we have. There's a there's a lot of slowness with my PC right now. I'm not sure if it's because of the recording or. Yeah. Okay. So I guess what I will do is Yeah, so it's not allowing me to change the language, brothers. I think it's what's best for me to do is to write these conjugations after class and then go over them with you at the beginning of the next class. So just keep that in mind. Inshallah, that is something we'll talk about next week. I don't want to waste time waiting on my computer to act properly before moving on. Okay, so then now that we said Al-Dhamma, that was Al-Dhamma. So that was so basically what this slide tells us, that Dhamma becomes a sign of Rafa in how many places? In 4 places. I want everyone for next class to memorize these 4 places, inshallah. Where does Dhamma become the sign of Rafa? It shouldn't be very hard, only 3 places. And I'll also, what I will do immediately, inshallah, after the class, is I'll put the harakas for you on the lesson, on today's lesson, so you guys can read the Arabic as well. But let's move on to al-waw. Where does waw become a sign of rafa? We said rafa has how many signs? From that slide, we said rafa has 4 signs. Al-dhammatu, exactly. Al-dhammatu, wal-wawu, wal-alif, wal-nun. So we spoke about al-dhamma, and we said where, in which places, for which words al-dhamma becomes a sign of rafa. Now we will talk about the words for which a waw becomes a sign of rafa. وأما الواو فتكون علامة للرفع في موضعين. In the case of al-waw, it becomes a sign of rafa in 2 places. In the sound masculine plural, and you guys should already know what a sound masculine plural is, right? We already spoke about this. And if you have any questions, please refer back to slide 27, in which I have explained the plurals. So in the sound masculine plural, a waw becomes a sign of rafa. So if I was to say ja al-muslimuna, al-muslimuna here would be marfu, or would have this inflection of al-rafa. Why? Because it has a waw. Okay. The second place where a waw, the letter waw, becomes a sign of rafa is in the 5 exceptional nouns. وفي الأسماء الخمسة. وأما الواو فتكون علامة للرفع في الموضعين في جمع المذكر السالم وفي الأسماء الخمسة، وهي أبوك وأخوك وحموك وفوك وجمال. So there are, the default position of nouns is to have their inflections with diacritical marks. So by default, nouns, the inflection of nouns is by diacritical marks. But there are 5 nouns which whose inflection is not by diacritical marks, but rather by letters, right? That is why we call them the 5 exceptional nouns, because they are an exception. They do not follow the default position of nouns. Nouns by default, they have diacritical marks for their inflections, and verbs yes, so verbs by default they have harakas. Oh, I'm sorry, they have letters for their inflection. So these are the different. That's the difference between nouns. Yes.
No, Sheikh. I was saying qad, saufa, al-sin. Those were the indicators of the verb.
Yeah. So those were the indicators of the verbs. Exactly. Those were the signs of verbs. But those signs were not specific to imperfect verbs, which is the subject of our discussion today. Those signs were general. For example, qad comes before a past tense verb as well. Sawfa and sin, yes, they both come before an imperfect verb. But at-ta'nith as-sakina, for example, also is attached only to the past tense verb. So those signs were general to all types of verbs. But here with the imperfect verbs, or when we talk about verbs, when it comes to i'rab, we are only talking about imperfect verbs, because only imperfect verbs accept i'rab. Past tense verb would be like a particle. Remember, I told you guys particles do not accept inflections. They take no inflections at all. Past tense verbs are also that way. They do not accept inflections. And that is something that we'll talk about more when we reach the chapter of verbs, which is in the middle of the book, inshallah. If I ever say something that doesn't quite make sense to you, make that a question in your mind, because it will come, because we will study it, inshallah, in the next chapter and the next lessons. So here, with the 5 exceptional nouns, as I said, they do not follow the default position of nouns, and their inflection is with letters and not diacritical marks. And because their inflection is with letters, waw becomes a sign of rafa for them. Al-waw becomes a sign of rafa. For example, and those 5 nouns are abuka, your father. I have the translation here. Your father, your brother, your in-laws, your mouth, and possessor. So these 5 nouns in Arabic, their inflection is with letters, not diacritical marks. And waw becomes a sign of rafa for them. So for example, if I said ja'a abuka, that means your father came. That means your father came. So this waw tells you abuka is what? Has the inflection of rafa. Abuka has the inflection of rafa. And because now abuka is marfu', meaning it has the inflection of rafa, based on the sentence you can tell that abuka is what? Abuka is the subject. So the same thing that the layers that we discussed at the beginning of the class, we'll keep on repeating, because basically that's how we reach the meaning or the role of the word. We go from the diacritical mark or the letter to the inflection, and then from the inflection we reach the role and the meaning behind that word. So here I think we'll stop here, but quickly again, these 5 nouns, exceptional nouns, are abuka, akhuka, hamuki, fuka, wa dumal. So if I was to change this with an alif, or add an alif here instead of a waw, yeah, I can't change it right now. My computer's acting up. But anyhow, just imagine an alif here instead of waw. That in that case, it would not be marfu'. That would indicate an inflection that is called a nasb. The inflection that is called a nasb. If there was an alif here, if there was a ya here instead of a waw, that would be the inflection of khafd. Okay, so this waw in these 5 nouns indicates rafa. And if you think I'm repeating this too many times, I am not. Believe me, you will have to repeat this over and over again, like 1,000 times before it sticks. So there's a purpose, there's a reason behind why I repeat it so many times. Inshallah, we'll stop here. Do you have any questions about what we have discussed, or anything else? Yes, brother Marajul.
Yeah, Sheikh, for the previous examples, our sequence was like this. If we see a Dhamma, that means it's a Rafa, and that Rafa indicates that's a subject within that sentence. And for these 5 exclusive words, whenever we see a waw, that would be the indication of a Rafa, and that would tell us that particular, those exclusive words are the subject within the word. Is that so?
Very good.
Okay,
Yes,
right.
yes, that's beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Right.
but there's another element to it. I made it. Maybe I made it a bit simplistic for you to understand. There's another element to it. So you also have to look at this complete sentence to get the big picture, right? You have to look at the complete sentence. For example, if instead of ja'a, yeah. So I think that's for I'll explain that later in the next classes. But for now, what you just explained, brother Marajul, that is perfect. You know, that is the process or the sequence how we reach the meaning and the role of the word in the sentence. Again, you may say to yourself, we didn't study much. We just studied maybe 5 lines of the book. But at the beginning, this is how we have to move forward, because like I said, this is the foundation. We need to make sure that the foundation is solid before we can move forward. So inshallah, bear with me. That's why if you saw when I sent the announcement for the class, I said this class will be 35 lessons. Usually, like for a small book like that, people would think the class would maybe 5-10 lessons, but I think it's crucial for beginners to know to understand the foundations fully before we move on to anything else. So that is why I'm taking it slowly. Inshallah.
Jazakallah
If there are no,
khairan.
yeah, wa iyyakum, barakallah fikum, jazakumullah khairan for your patience.
I had a question, if that's all right.
Yes.
Could you go to slide 25, please?
Yeah.
You know how you said, for Rafa, it means linguistically it's lowering, right? So how would you say like these 4 bullet points are basically lowering? Like how would you
Rafa
define
is raising.
Yeah, so it's a good question, but yeah, so there Rafa is raising though. That's
it's raising. Oh, sorry, I guess I got it mixed up.
Yeah. So
raising. Yeah.
Linguistically, so the reason, for example, الضم, linguistically, ضم means to contract. Okay. الضمة, it means to contract. What do you do to your lips when you pronounce a dhamma? Don't you do this to your lips? Ooh, you contract the lips, right? So that's one of the interesting things about it matches how you pronounce it. But I want you to basically, I need to make one point clear, that like the linguistic definitions and the terminological definitions, they have some type of relationship between them, but that relationship is not the focal point of our discussions, because sometimes that relationship can be very vague and hidden. So it will be hard. It is hard to always see that relationship, but it's good to know that there is a relationship, so it makes it interesting when you realize what the relationship is. But if, for example, if you ever see that there's the linguistic meaning of a word is something, and the terminological meaning of it does not seem to have any apparent relationship with that linguistic meaning, you don't necessarily have to think too much of it. Eventually, you may read it in some book what the relationship is, but as far as being able to understand the content of the book and Arabic grammar, that would be a side point. It wouldn't be the main the core of the subject. But that's That's a good question. I personally like to mention these things sometimes because it adds, like, it's the spices you add to food to make it taste better. So it makes it interesting. It makes Arabic language interesting. But the good question, and to answer your question, al-dhamma, al-rafa, you see how al-dhamma is on top of the letter, the last letter?
Yep.
So we are raising the diacritical marks and we are putting it on top of the letter. What khafad, if you remember, it was a kasra, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a kasra is at the bottom, isn't it? So we have raised that diacritical mark, we have put it on top. So that's one relationship between raising and al-dhamma being a sign of rafa.
Okay. Hey, got it. Thanks for that.
No problem. Well, yeah. So if no more questions, I will let you guys go. Jazakumullah khairan. You are free to leave, but I will stick around for 5 more minutes in case anyone else has any questions. But whoever, please, the class is over. So inshallah, I will see you guys next week if you will drop off.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Like I always have to.